Friday, 4th of August, 1944, Amsterdam. A group of 8 Jews are escorted at gunpoint out of an office building. They had been hiding in the attic of this place for 3 years, doing their best to keep away from the marauding Nazis. Now, they face deportation to the infamous concentration camps. Only one of the group would survive. Amongst their number was a 14-year-old budding writer and keen diarist who has since gone on to become perhaps the most iconic victim of the Holocaust. Today, Descent into Darkness looks at the life and times and the tragic story of Anne Frank. Early years. Anneliese Marie Frank was born on the 12th of June 1929 at the Maingau Red Cross Clinic in Frankfurt in the then Weimar Republic of interwar Germany. Her parents were Otto and Edith, and she had an elder sister, Margot Betty, who was 3 years her senior. Otto and Edith were devoted parents and encouraged their 2 daughters towards expanding their minds with an extensive library of books. Clearly they had designs that their 2 girls should make something of themselves rather than simply wait for a rich man to come along and make them a housewife. The Franks were not strictly observant to their Judaism, more culturally Jewish than anything else it would appear. They had assimilated well into the general German society, but in 1934, when Anne was age 4, the family decided it was time to leave Germany due to Adolf Hitler's seizure of absolute power in Germany and the implications this had for German Jews. Many other families, numbering an estimated 300,000 people that had the means to escape the country, had done so between 1934 and 1939, but sadly for many, it would turn out to be not far enough. Initially, the female members of the Frank family had moved to Aachen in Westphalia to live with Edith's mother Rosa, while Otto stayed behind in Frankfurt. But very soon after, opportunity came knocking when Otto was offered the chance of a job in Amsterdam in the Netherlands. Edith sought out accommodation for the family, who then all moved to the Dutch capital, settling into an apartment in Merwedelplein in the Rivierenbuurt area of the city. The business that Otto was working for was named Opekta, a company that produced pectin, a natural gelling agent derived from fruit. Anne and Margot were enrolled at the 6th Montessori school, which still exists today. Initially, they both struggled with having to learn the Dutch language, but very quickly showed themselves to be bright kids. Margot even became a star student. They would continue their studies right up until the Nazis invaded the Netherlands in 1940 and imposed their will upon the country, banning Jews from education. In 1938, Otto Frank had gained enough capital and expertise to start up a new company called Pectacon, which specialized in the wholesale of pickling spices and herbs. With the aforementioned invasion of the Netherlands, Otto made efforts for the family to escape to the United States, but sadly the American consulate in Rotterdam was destroyed by German bombs, taking the Franks' paperwork with it. So near to permanent safety, yet so far. The Nazis soon introduced their deeply anti-Semitic rules, segregating Dutch Jews from wider society and placing severe restrictions on what they were allowed to do, where they were allowed to go. These rules were even so petty as forcing them to walk in the gutter rather than on the pavement. Into Hiding and Diary. In mid-1942, the Nazis began mass deportations of Jews from the Netherlands to the east. With very little choices left open to them, the Franks planned to go into hiding from their oppressive overlords. These plans had to be urgently brought forward when Margot received a letter ordering her to report to the Central Office for Jewish Emigration. They left a note for the next-door neighbour, the Coopers family, asking them to look after their cat, and Anne specifically asked Tosha Coopers, her friend, to keep a book, a tea set, and a bag of marbles safe for her, saying, "I'm worried about my marbles because I'm scared they might fall into the wrong hands. Could you keep them for me for a little while?" Just before they went into hiding, Anne was given an autograph book, bound in red and white checkered pattern with a small lock on the front, which she decided to use as a diary, nicknaming it Kitty. Her very first entry on the 20th of June 1942 described the many restrictions that the Nazis had imposed upon the Jews, along with this: "I hope I shall be able to confide in you completely, as I have never been able to do in anyone before. and I hope that you will be a great support and comfort to me. I expect you will be interested to hear what it feels like to hide. Well, all I can say is that I don't know myself yet. I don't think I shall ever feel really at home in this house, but that does not mean that I loathe it here. It is more like being on vacation in a very peculiar boarding house, rather than a mad way of looking at being in hiding. Perhaps that is how it strikes me. The fact that we can never go outside bothers me more than I can say, and then I am really afraid that we'll be discovered and shot. Not a very nice prospect, needless to say. The hiding place set aside for the family was an annex at the rear of the Opekta building, spanning 5 floors, 3 of which would be occupied by the family, the entrance being concealed behind a bookcase. Once they entered the annex, they knew that they could never go outside again until the war was over, whenever that may have been. Furthermore, they had to keep completely silent during the working hours of the factory to avoid discovery. Only the senior managers and a couple of secretaries at Opekta knew of their existence and kept the secret annex from the rest of the employees. In exchange, the Franks would carry on making pectin and jam through the night in the annex, increasing productivity for the factory on the sly, and also made sure the building was secure at night and unlock the main door early in the morning for the managers and workers. The jam the family made would be sold on the black market, and the funds used to buy more ingredients and other things such as cabbage, which they would then make into sauerkraut to again sell on. Anne liked to spend her quiet time on her own in the attic room at the very top of the annex, where she would safely look out from the high window and get a limited glimpse of the outside world, along with the view of the steeple of the Vesterkirk church, which she had found to be a most beautiful building. She would often look up to the stars at night and muse on her situation and eventual salvation. On the 13th of July that same year, the Franks were joined by another Jewish family in the annex. Hermann and Augusta van Pels and their 16-year-old son Peter moved in, which, despite the initial elation at having some new people to talk to, led to some resentment from the younger Franks, who were now forced to share their sanctuary with these strangers. Then in November, they were joined by one more person, dentist Fritz Pfeffer. This was a huge point of contention for Anne, who was forced to share her bedroom with him, which made her feel uncomfortable and a huge invasion of space. These factors led to frequent clashes between them all, Anne considering Fritz and Hermann to be exceedingly selfish and Augusta as foolish and vain. After a while, she did begin to develop a romantic attraction toward Peter van Pels, and the two did begin a tenuous relationship, even sharing their first kiss. But, as her diary indicates, she began to rationalize her feelings as being due to the unavoidable proximity of their situation, and eventually she drifted away from him. On the 10th of October 1942, Anne wrote an entry in her diary along with a photograph of her with the following caption: "This is a photograph of me as I wish I looked all the time, then I might still have a chance of getting to Hollywood, but now I am afraid I usually look quite different." Anne regularly wrote short stories based around the annex and its inhabitants that she would read aloud to everyone after dinner as entertainment. She mused in her diary that rather than becoming an actress, she would like to be a journalist when it was all over, writing on the 5th of April 1944. "I finally realized that I must do my schoolwork and to keep from being ignorant, to get on in life, to become a journalist, because that's what I want. I know I can write, but it remains to be seen whether I really have talent. And if I don't have the talent to write books or newspaper articles, I can always write for myself. But I want to achieve more than that. I can't imagine living like Mother, Mrs. Van Daan, and all the other women who go about their work and are then forgotten. I need something besides a husband and children to devote myself to. I want to be useful, to bring enjoyment to people, even those I've never met. I want to go on living even after my death, and that's why I am so grateful to God for having given me this gift, which I can use to develop myself and to express all that's inside me. When I write, I can shake off all my cares. My sorrow disappears. My spirits are revived. But, and that's a big question, will I ever be able to write something great? Will I ever become a journalist or a writer?" Between May and August of 1944, Anne began compiling various entries of her diary onto separate sheets of notepaper, intending to publish after the war under the title the secret annex, telling of life under Nazi occupation. She wrote of this in her main diary. Just imagine how exciting it would be if I were to publish a romance of the secret annex. The title alone would be enough to make people think it was a detective story. But seriously, it would be quite funny 10 years after the war if we Jews were able to tell how we lived and what we ate and talked about here. Although I tell you a lot, still, even so, you only know very little of our lives. In one of her last ever entries on the 15th of July 1944, Anne expressed her sorrow for the present and hopes of the future. I simply can't build up my hopes on a foundation consisting of confusion, misery, and death. I see the world gradually being turned into a wilderness. I hear the ever-approaching thunder, which will destroy us too. I can feel the suffering of millions, and yet, if I look up to the heavens, I think that it will all come right, that this cruelty too will end, and that peace and tranquility will return again. In the meantime, I must uphold my ideals, for perhaps the time will come when I shall be able to carry them out. Yours, Anne M. Frank. Discovery and Fate. On the 4th of August 1944, the authorities finally caught up with the residents of the annex. A German official, SS Oberscharführer Karl Silberbauer of the secret police, the Sicherheitsdienst, and 2 collaborators from the Dutch police arrested them all and took them away. The residents of the annex were held by the Reich Main Security Office overnight, where they were all interrogated, and then taken to the overcrowded prison in Wetteringschans, where they were held for a further 2 days. The family were then taken to the Westerbork transit camp and were interned there from August to September. While they were here, they were subjected to hard labor, as due to being caught in hiding, they were considered criminals. From here, they were taken to the infamous Auschwitz, and they soon came to realize that the majority of the new arrivals who could not work were sent to be immediately gassed. Anne and her female compatriots were housed in the women's section at Auschwitz-Birkenau and were set on to hard labor after having their heads shaved and an identifying number tattooed on their arm and their bodies disinfected for lice. At some point, the Frank women were due to be transferred to another labor camp at Libau in Silesia, but Anne had developed a serious case of scabies due to the appalling conditions at Auschwitz and was not permitted to go. The rest of the family opted to stay with her. Fritz Pfeffer was spared from being gassed due to his medical backgrounds. Whilst at Auschwitz, he was briefly reunited with Otto Frank and Hermann van Pels, but this did not last long, as Fritz was transferred away on the 29th of October, first to Sachsenhausen, and then taken to the Neuengamme concentration camp. He died from enterocolitis on the 20th of December 1944, at the age of 55. Hermann van Pels was declared fit for work and was put to work building roads near the camp, but at some point he injured his hand, meaning that he could no longer work. Survivors from Auschwitz claim that Hermann was taken to the gas chambers in October of 1944. He was 46 years old. Eventually, with the advance of the Red Army creeping ever closer, the SS decided to evacuate the Auschwitz camps. Everyone that was healthy enough was either transported back toward Germany or, at the very end, forced to walk all the way. Those who were not strong enough to do so were simply left behind. Anne, Margot, and August van Pels were amongst the first to be selected to be taken to Bergen-Belsen. Sadly, Edith Frank was not well enough to make the journey and would die of severe deprivation soon after.
On the 6th of January 1945, only 3 weeks before the liberation of Auschwitz, she was 44 years old.
It is not exactly clear what happened to Augusta van Pels, but the 2 prevailing stories are that she either contracted typhus and died in Bergen-Belsen, or that she died during being transported to Theresienstadt. She was 42 years old. Peter van Pels was amongst those who were forced to walk from Auschwitz back deeper into the quickly shrinking German Reich, ending up in Upper Austria at the Mauthausen camp. He was taken to the Melk subcamp and was set to work in the mine there. However, this hard work took a deep toll on him, and he fell ill. Sadly, Peter van Pels died on the 10th of May 1945 5 days after the camp was liberated by the US Army. He was 18 years old. When they arrived at Belsen, Anne met an old friend, Nanette Blitz, to whom she confided that she believed both her parents were dead and that she did not desire to live any longer. Blitz noted that Anne was emaciated and shivering constantly. Margot was too ill to rise from her bunk. Margot Frank died from typhus on an unknown date in February 1945 at the age of either 18 or 19. It is not exactly clear when Anne Frank finally succumbed to the conditions of Bergen-Belsen, but it is thought to have been around February or March of 1945, only a few weeks away from the liberation of the camp by the British Army on the 15th of April. She was only 15 years old. Of all those taken away from the annex on the 4th of August 1944, only Otto Frank would survive the war. A rat? Over the years, there have been many theories as to why the Franks were eventually discovered. It is widely alleged that the eventual discovery of the annex was down to another Jewish family that snitched to the German authorities in exchange for preferential treatment for themselves. This came from a claim in January of 2022 that a member of the Judenrat, or Jewish Council, Arnold van der Berg, had given them up to save his own family. This investigation was fleshed out in Rosemary Sullivan's book, The Betrayal of Anne Frank, a cold case investigation. However, the supporting evidence for this theory has been called into question by many scholars of the Holocaust. SS Oberscharführer Karl Silberbauer himself stated that the informant had the voice of a young woman. This detail could point the finger towards Nelly Voskuil, the younger sister of Elizabeth, aka Bep Voskuil, who was one of the few that knew of the annex's existence and acted as a go-between for the black market sales. Nelly had been a Nazi collaborator and seemed to know of the rest of the family's help to fugitive Jews. She had moved to Austria to be with a German officer, but had returned in 1943 when they broke up. Another theory goes that the Opekta factory itself had fallen under suspicion for an entirely unrelated reason, that of ration book fraud. This could have caught the eye of the SD, and then the discovery of the annex could well have just been pure tragic coincidence. But whatever the reason, those poor people who had done so well for just over 2 years evading the claws of the evil Nazi regime had been caught and shared their fate with so many of their fellow Jews and others the Nazis deemed undesirables. They were only a few months away from liberation by the Allies. Their freedom was so close, and yet, despite the Germans being very firmly on the back foot, they were still pouring efforts into rooting people out. The Franks, the Van Pels, and Fritz Pfeffer became just another statistic in a German file. Legacy. By hook or by crook, Anne Frank has become quite possibly the most iconic victim of the entire Holocaust. Perhaps this is due to the widespread publication of her diary, coupled with her tender age. Whatever the reason, her image has now become a literal poster child as a warning to the very real impact of hate and bigotry. After the war, Otto Frank returned to Amsterdam and found that 2 of his secretaries, Bep Voskuil and Miep Gijs, had thankfully saved Anne's diary and kept it safe. Reading the diary for the first time, he said of the moment, "For me it was a revelation. I had no idea of the depth of her thoughts and feelings. She had kept all these feelings to herself." Otto would go on to publish Anne's diary under the English translated title Diary of a Young Girl, albeit with some aspects understandably edited out, such as when she wrote about getting her period and other things like that. Anne's diary has gone on to become one of the most famous books ever published. It's such a crying shame that Anne herself did not get to see just what a great success she became. Today, her diary has sold many millions of copies, making her perhaps the most famous diarist of all time, right up there with the likes of Samuel Pepys and Virginia Woolf, perhaps even surpassing them. Otto Heinrich Frank died on the 19th of August 1980 at the age of 91. He did the memory of his little girl so proud. Today, The building in which the Franks took shelter has been turned into a museum in which the family, and Anne in particular, and receives thousands of visitors every year who wish to learn more and pay their respects. A memorial in the form of a gravestone, although not their actual resting place, stands today in Bergen-Belsen, inscribed to both Anne and Margot. A song written by the Irish folk singer Johnny McAvoy is dedicated to the story of Anne Frank, and it is a truly moving piece. I can think of no better way of paying tribute to her than by teaming up once again with my friend Mally, who sang so powerful in the video for the Hull Triple Trawler tragedy. And so, here is Mally singing the ballad of Anne Frank.
What did you dream, my love, my love? What woke you from your sleep? I dreamt I saw the soldiers again march up our street. I saw them in their uniforms, in their boots of shining leather, and I knew when they came to my front door that they would go no further. And the wind blows cold from the Zuider Zee, and Amsterdam is weeping, but Vincent's tears can't wash away the shame that we are feeling. And what did you dream, my love, that keeps you now from sleeping? I heard the soldiers on the stairs in foreign tongues were speaking, and they took me to the railway yard where the carriages awaited, and on their sleeve was a crooked cross, on my heart was the Star of David. And the wind blows cold from the Zuider Zee, and Amsterdam is weeping, but Vincent's tears can't wash away the shame that we are feeling. What did you dream, my love, my love? There are tears upon your pillow. I saw the chimneys in the east, and the black smoke from them billows, and it slowly crept across the land till it covered every nation. But no one heard my lonesome cry, or came to my salvation. And the wind blows cold from the Zuider Zee, and Amsterdam is weeping, but Vincent's tears can't wash away the shame that we are feeling. So sleep, my love, it's over now. It's time that you were leaving. The morning stars are fading fast. There's no more time for dreaming. For the sun will warm the earth again, and dry up all the sorrow. The flowers that faded yesterday will bloom again tomorrow. And the wind blows cold from the Zuider Zee, and Amsterdam is weeping. But Vincent's tears can't wash away the shame that we are feeling. But Vincent's tears can't wash away the shame that we are feeling.
Thank you for watching this video. I do hope you found it informative and interesting. If you did, please smash the old like button and help it reach a wider audience. Subscribe and have a look through my back catalogue to find other videos like this one and many other aspects and events from the dark side of history. My goal is to become the Mr. Beast of documentaries, so come on, help a brother out. Thank you once again to Mally for the song. Have you ever read Anne Frank's diary? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I do so love interacting with you all because without you this would all be pointless, so I like to make sure I never forget who really matters here. If you wish to do so, you can support DID on Patreon or via the Super Thanks button if you wish to give a one-off donation. Or you can get yourself or a friend something practical from the DID merch store. A huge thank you to all my current patrons. I love you all and I really appreciate your contributions. And in the meantime, take care of yourselves, and I shall see you on our next descent into darkness.